What comes to mind when you think about social studies? When I think about social studies in school, I recall those thick and heavy textbooks that I used to have to carry around. And the content in the textbooks were not very intriguing either. But that's not what social studies is all about. It's more than just facts about when a war happened or who the 16th president was. Learning social studies gives us information about ourselves, understanding what the society is like what it is, and a way to help us critically think about the world. Yet this may not be something that we all experienced in our school days. There is so much more than what is in our textbooks, and this is where our role as future educators takes place. A big part of social studies is learning the history. History can be as boring or as fun as we make it to be. One way to learn about history is through understanding the different perspectives in an event. Let's take the Vietnam War. Do you remember learning about the Vietnam War? Well, here are some recalls of the war from other people. Here's my mom's point of view on the war. She was living in South Vietnam when the war was happening. And here is another person's perspective of the war. Both sides showed a positive light for America. But what about all those protesters in America? What about the high casualties? How would you describe the war if you saw these pictures? The Vietnam War was so much more controversial than what was depicted by textbooks. Are wars really that clear-cut? There are multiple perspectives in a situation. Someone from North Vietnam may not have the same opinions as the US or as my mom. As a teacher, we can always allow history to be messy, address these conflicts, and discuss the different points of view. Our everyday lives has been impacted in some way by the past. The place that we walk by every day probably has some sort of history, but has been forgotten and unspoken by many. Will it impact our daily life without knowing the history? Maybe not, but it could open our eyes and help us connect our present-day lives with the changes that have occurred throughout history. After taking the Black and Blue tour and interviewing some of the UNC students, it showed how little we know about the place we spend so much time at. Here is my roommate's reaction about the tour. Knowing the history of a place makes history so much more real. Who would have guessed that Saunders Hall was a place where KKK meetings were held, or the graveyard is segregated, or that the interviewee's favorite scenery is named after the largest slave owner in the state? These things make where we live more interesting and allow us to have a better connection with history. Learning about social studies allows students to begin to understand how and why the society works, and students are beginning to have a grasp on this knowledge. Here is a glimpse of the understanding of social studies from the third grade students. Although students may sometimes have misconceptions about how certain things work, as future educators, we are there to guide them and help them become more knowledgeable citizens. Social studies, particularly history, is also easily forgotten. So what should we do? Some of the most unforgettable learning experiences were based off of projects, field trips, and hands-on activities. When I asked someone what they learned in social studies in elementary school, her first response was, "It was never part of the curriculum." So then I asked her about field trips and projects, and she started to connect the things she experienced with social studies, and with very good detail. These are the types of activities that create a lasting memory for our students. These assignments may take a longer time, but it beats teaching the same old facts repeatedly. Social studies is related to almost all things around us. It's not merely a subject that requires really good memory. It's much more than that. It's about understanding situations through different stories and perspectives. It's about learning our roles in the society. It's also about understanding how the past affects the present and how the present may affect the future. But most importantly, all these topics in social studies must somehow be engaging and relatable to the students in order for all this information to be valuable to them in the future. I was once a student who did not like social studies, but now as a future educator, I have a greater appreciation and a better understanding and importance of the subject.